It is absolutely wonderful to have you joining us this afternoon. I'm going to share my screen here, and we're just going to begin walking through today's presentation. I'm going to get this in presentation mode here, and I think we're all set to go. So again, welcome. Great to have you here today. I'm so kind of anxious about this particular presentation because I fear some of you might think, oh my goodness, Curt's going to talk to us for a brief moment this afternoon about something really, really super pedestrian. And I learned this a generation or two ago. Why is he wasting my time with this? I really hope that quickly I will be able to convince you that this is not a waste of your time. Kind of a reset, maybe, a recalibration of what we're doing with our research and how we're doing it. So, as you may have seen in the announcements for this program, what's our theme for today? What's our title for today? Are we really fully using compilations? And again, some of you might say, okay, Curt, where are you going with this? A quick look at what we might be missing. One of the most frequently asked questions here in the Genealogy Center, and it's kind of broad brush, but some form of where do I go from here? Throughout my career here at the Genealogy Center and in the genealogy space doing presentations around the country, oftentimes people will ask a question, and at least part of the answer to that question is in the material they already have, in their electronic files, in the book that they're holding in their hand that they've come up to the Ask Desk to ask a question about. So I have to ask, are we really fully using compilations? So let's walk into this, if you will, okay? So it really is about the details. My colleagues and many of you probably have tired of hearing me say that we live in the best of times for genealogy, and we really do. These are the best of times. So we know, though, with great opportunity comes great challenge, right? So I'm going to present us with some things to kind of go, about. Like, doing good research takes intention. We don't stumble into good research. Like, you don't stumble into a 5-course meal. It takes intention to create the appetizer, to create the salad, to create the entree, to create the after entree, to create it takes intention to do that. Well, doing good research takes intention. So when we're looking to pursue and preserve and present our family stories, it takes intention. And intention begins with the very fundamental detail of what is it that I'm holding in my hand and what data does it contain when I'm using a published book or when I'm looking at an ebook online? How do I leverage all the content there? So point number one, doing good research takes intention. The GPS is a thing, I say. Genealogical Proof Standard, what popped up right with GPS is a thing, is the first, and I believe my favorite, one of the 5 points of the Genealogical Proof Standard. We are engaging in reasonably exhaustive research. Reasonably exhaustive research. That means more than just looking for our surname in the index and tossing the book aside if it doesn't have the surnames we're looking for. It means more than just finding our surname of interest in a book, in a database. Are we really using all of a compilation? So reasonably exhaustive research. I'm going to try to really expand that out, again, in a very pedestrian way, hoping that you are patient and with an open mind on this beautiful Wednesday afternoon in Fort Wayne. So after reasonably exhaustive research as the first part, the number one part of GPS, I want to offer to you that there are many layers to fans. And we all remember fans, right? Friends, associates, and neighbors. So when we're using a compilation, do we remember that? I know sometimes when we look at a census document, when we're looking at deed records, when we're looking at other primary and secondary source records, we kind of sort of maybe tend to remember that fans is a thing as well, that friends, associates, and neighbors, it's really important to look for those when we're looking at land ownership maps, when we're looking at all kinds of land and deed records, when we're looking at census records and passenger lists. It also is of great consequence when we're looking at compiled material like books and manuscripts, when we're looking at books that have been published and manuscripts that have been organized and perhaps calendared, described, detailed, cataloged. There are many, many layers to fans. Are we looking for all the fans all the time in the compilations that are in our hands? I fear we're not. The fifth bullet point there, we need to have an investigative mind. That needs to be our mindset. When we are going to find some treasure, we don't just guess at a spot and start digging to the core of the earth. If we're criminal investigators and we're looking to go to a burglar and we're trying to find out who entered and where they entered and what they might have taken, we don't just look at the broken glass in the storefront and move on. We don't just look at the empty case where jewelry used to be and move on. We have an investigative mind. We look around. We look for everything we can find. That has to be our same approach when we use something as pedestrian as a published book. And I watch researchers all the time not do that. And it makes me a little frustrated because I think, oh, I'm so sorry. You're missing so much by not taking a few more minutes with that book, with that compilation, than just looking for your name and moving on, making a copy with your cell phone or on a photocopier, and then moving on. Finally, it is about the story. To have a good story, you want all the information, right? You want all the facts. You want to do reasonably exhaustive research. You want to find and leverage all the fans. When we want to know the lives of our great-great-grandparents, we just don't want to know the beginning and the end. We don't want to know just the beginning, a little bit of the middle, and some of the end. We really want to know all about their lives. A number of years ago, I did a number of presentations talking about what I call researching in 4D. That's like one beyond 3D. Researching in 4D. What is that? It's finding out about the lives of the people who are in our family's stories. So what was going on during World War I when they joined? What was the vibe, the spirit alike in their hometown? What was being published in the papers? Even though it may not put a single person on your ancestor chart, it fills in the story. It gives you the story. So we're going to march from this intentionality, GPS, reasonably exhaustive research, fans, investigative mind. And we're going to take a look at how we can better use, wait for it, books. And if I see the number of people online just drop like a stone, I'll know that you're thinking I'm maybe just a little bit too pedestrian today. But I invite you to hang with me for just a few minutes, right? That's all the time we typically have. That goes by so quickly. So I know you know this, but you probably haven't seen it on a screen before. So here we go. Potential, and that's the operative word here, potential parts of books. All these are potentially part of a book that may or may not have your ancestor in it, but may, whether it has your ancestor or potential ancestor in it or not, may provide you with an amazing amount of data, right? So we have the potential of a title page, a preface, a foreword, table of contents, footnotes, endnotes, bibliography, illustrations. And if that's not enough, you have the potential of all of this. Tables, lists, and then the actual like text block, right? Indices, appendices, conclusions, afterwards. We should look for all of these components, all of these features, I like to call them, in any book that trips our fancy enough that we pick it up off a library shelf, or we click on a link to it in Internet Archive or HathiTrust or Family Search Digital Library. we should look for all of these things because they will help us be better researchers, and it will help us do reasonably exhaustive research. Even better than that is that they will help us find all the data, tell a better, fuller story, right? I am, and my colleagues can attest to this, I have been a lifelong what I call citation analysis nut. I have been known to, when I find a book that may really focus on the geographic area where I believe my family lived for several generations, or even better, may have my particular family names prominently listed on the title page or in the table of contents, I usually flip to the back of the book almost immediately. And most people think, there's Witcher. He's looking for an index. He wants to get to the names as quick as possible. Actually not. The thing I'm looking for is a notes section and a bibliography. So what is citation analysis? I fear many individuals don't use this or leverage this as they should, and you are potentially missing a whole lot by not doing that. Now, when we get through with our musings and conversation today, you might think that my explanation here is a little tortured. However, I can't tell you how many times it's helped me in my personal research and how many times it's helped me help patrons here in the Genealogy Center. So quickly, what is citation analysis? It's the process of identifying for further study the footnotes, endnotes, and bibliographies from books and other compilations in order to learn of and locate new sources of data. I want to emphasize that. Learn of and locate new sources of data. It doesn't say anything there about in order to locate another ancestor, in order to prove another entire family branch of a tree. No, it says to locate new sources of data. I don't know what causes you to break out in a cold sweat or keeps you awake at night, genealogically speaking. For me, it's running out of sources when I haven't found, identified, understood the whole family story. And citation analysis is a big, big part of that. So for the next few minutes, we're just going to take a few minutes to look at different parts of a compilation and how we can leverage those parts. I hope it gives you at least a mini aha moment, like, I never thought of it that way. Or maybe, and you only have to do this to yourself. You don't have to put it in chat. You don't have to admit it to anybody. Maybe you'll say, yeah, I've never looked for that in a book. So I want to start out with the title page. And this is a great one. Nettie Schreiner-Yentis really did a great job in exposing so many records for Virginia research. And so many people can trace their family to Virginia. I mean, Virginia has more than 4 centuries of families and history for here in the United States. Look at this wonderful title page. The 1787 Census of Virginia. And we get all excited because we love enumerations, right? We love census records. They have so much information, and we like them because they do what? They put people in context, right? So we can find fans. So look at this huge descriptive kind of subtitle. The 1787 Census of Virginia, an accounting of the names of every white male tithable over 21 years. We can do a mental pause there. The number of white males between 16 and 21 years, the number of slaves over 16 and those under 16 years, together with a listing of their horses, cattle and carriages, etc. For many of you, you're thinking, probably, or maybe just some of you, you're thinking, this sounds more like a tax list, but yet the title says Census of Virginia. So we're curious, aren't we? Or we have an investigative mind. We want to investigate this a little bit further. And so we go to this other part of the book called the foreword. Almost no one ever reads the foreword, to our collective detriment. Look what happens on page 2 in this particular foreword. Inasmuch as this work, which is termed the 1787 Census of Virginia, contains the same type of data that some other censuses have, it should be considered a census and not just a tax list being used as a census. Well, love Nettie Schreiner-Yentis. She did awesome work. Bless her heart. She's resting in peace now. I'm sorry. It's not a census record. It is a tax list. And there's a big difference. What if you don't have anything taxable or tithable? Then you're not going to be listed. So when we think census records, we think, okay, everyone in a particular area of a particular age is going to be listed. But with a tax list, there's yet another requirement. So a great marketing strategy to call this a census record because it piques our interest and says, aha, Virginia, great place. Trace my ancestors there. Who wouldn't want a pre-country, really organized country census record before the 1790 census, right? Before we really organized. 1776 became an independent country, and a decade or two got ourselves organized. First enumeration, as you all know, 1790. And here's this census before that first enumeration. Well, no, it's a tax list, and it does make a difference. And you continue on through the forward. And so it's called the 1787 census, not census, but now we learn tax list. And look at some more useful information in this forward. Unfortunately, as you can see on the screen, not all the tax lists for 1787 survive. Oh, well, that's interesting. What did the compiler do about that? Well, for the counties of Chesterfield and York and the city of Williamsburg, use was made of the 1786 and the 1788 tax list. So really, the 1787 census of Virginia is neither a census, or for some locations, it's not 1787. It's a year before or a year after. And you might think, a year here, a year there, doesn't make that much difference, does it, Curt? I say that kind of facetiously because you start inserting what I call squishiness close enough into your family research, you end up with some amazing, wonderful, I use that term with air quotes, interesting family history. You end up with people being married after they're buried and other such interesting anomalies. Moving down through that forward, 3 of the Kentucky counties that were in Virginia at that time present a unique problem. Population was more fluid on the frontier, and the compiler realized that by using any other year, it might not reflect the true picture. So they're again playing around with 1789 instead of 1787, earlier, later. So the 1787 census of Virginia is kind of, sort of 1787 and not really a census. Does it put people in a place at a time doing something? Absolutely. But as a researcher, don't you want to know what it is exactly that you're looking at? And I think you do. So title page and forward, we just covered 2 parts of a book there. We have an investigative mind. We want to investigate. One of my favorite publications, the Harvard Encyclopedia of American Ethnic Groups. It's been out of print for a long time. We keep trying to influence Harvard University Press to republish it. Sometimes you can find some bargains on used bookstores, online, Abe Books, Add All Books, but there's some amazing information in here. And again, if we use this compilation, oh my goodness, everyone should look in this compilation for the ethnic group of their ancestral research, whether it's Finnish, Polish, Slavic, English, Irish. There's at least a chapter in this book. So the Harvard Encyclopedia of American Ethnic Groups, I just went to the Finnish section because I have so many Finns in my ancestral background. That would be no, I don't. I just wanted to see how they treat that. So they have pages and pages and pages, which give really meaningful things, in my opinion, because if we do have Finnish ancestors, the text block of this book sets a great context. You know what? There'll be like a 5% chance or less that you will find your specific ancestor listed in this book, but it's so valuable because it will tell you where to look. I like to say, in a polite and collegial and professional way, it'll tell you where to go, right? So that second paragraph, other immigrants from Finland before 1860 were mostly sailors, deserted their ships, et cetera, told you where they went, and sometimes what they did. Every single section in this encyclopedia has a decent bibliography at the end. And I already admitted that I'm a citation analysis nut, right? So this bibliography, it's kind of like an annotated bibliography, not just a straight list, but some explanation to go with that list. So you have a number of titles. Finns in America, a bibliography. Migration from Finland to North America in the years between the United States Civil War and the First World War. I mean, you can quickly on your own personal screens kind of scroll down there and say, oh my goodness, there's a lot of publications listed here that if I did have Finns, I might want to explore those. Those may give me more records and actually give me names of my ancestors. And every single section has this. So as a citation analysis nut, Curt's pretty happy when he runs into a book like this. Indiana, as well as many other states, have these kind of ethnic compilations. People in Indiana, the Ethnic Experience, has one just like the Harvard Encyclopedia. A number of states like Michigan and Wisconsin and Minnesota, they publish smaller books, one for each ethnic group. So Poles in Minnesota, Slovaks in Wisconsin, etc. Just taking a quick look through people in Indiana. Again, you can kind of zoom in on your computer screen, but these are French and information about French settlers in Indiana. And the first paragraph on the left here, first immigrants, tells you a little bit about them, where they came from. Political refugees, utopians, can be found among early 19th century. And just keep kind of wafting through the text block, which is a consequential part of what we're looking for, right? Looking at the text block, really examining it. You can get so many research leads. It's pretty incredible. Settlement patterns of French in Indiana, 1850 to 1880. They tell you, these are the counties: Dearborn, Floyd, Harrison, Ripley, and Allen County. Those are the counties in mid-19th century where the French were living. So Indiana has 92 counties. This one publication takes your research from 92 counties down to just that handful. Is that of consequence? I would argue, yes. Yes, it is of consequence. And look at the footnotes, or the endnotes, I should say, at the end of this chapter on the French in Indiana. Again, a very rich annotated bibliography where you get the name of books that are published all over the place. A number of them are in the orphan works and open copyright. The copyright has expired on them, so they're public domain. So there's a possibility you can get some of these books that may give you far more information about French in Indiana on the Internet Archive, on HathiTrust. So from this book, it can lead you to other richer compilations. And again, it will help us do reasonably exhaustive research. It will help people like me not be so anxious about running out of resources. We're truly and completely using a compilation, right? We're using every part of it. And this is just another section of the endnotes for French. I stumbled upon this book many years ago, and I like to use it as often as is appropriate. It studies the Germans in one of my home counties in southern Indiana. So this is kind of ripped from my research. It's off-putting to some people because, oh my goodness, a German book is in German. An Indiana University professor collaborated on this. So this Indiana University professor and a German professor wanted to study people who came to two counties in Indiana, Knox County and Du Bois County. And it's amazing. A rich text block, so we always want to look at that. Horror of horrors, this version of the book doesn't have an index, so oh my gosh, we're never going to look at it, right? Because the only way we can use a compilation is to use the index and find the surname we're looking for. Gosh, I hope that idea left your minds years, if not decades ago. If this is about an ethnic group in a geographic area where our research is leading us, where our research is and has been, we want to look at this book and then consume all the parts of this book. So going through the text block of this book, there are so many maps of linking various towns in southern Indiana, particularly in Du Bois County. The link from Troy to Ferdinand to Jasper to Celestine. I mean, all those names sound familiar to me because I found them, and I have found them in my research. So already this book has high interest to me. And with all kinds of foreign language translators online, Google is a blessing. We can copy and paste the German text out of this work and get a decent translation. But I'm not even going to go there today because I want us to really focus on using the compilation that's in front of us, right? We can move on to phase 2 in a moment or two in our research. There are graphs about in Jasper, in a particular township. These are all the places in Germany where people that settled in DuBois County, in Ferdinand Township, in my little town of Jasper. These are where they came from. Oh my gosh, why wouldn't we want to leverage that in our research? And it came in this book that has no index and precious few names in it, right? So once again, just looking at using all the parts of this book, guess what? If you didn't really explore this book, you wouldn't find the summary tucked away in the back in English. So here's this great German book that we can easily, sift a lot of excellent data from, but the summary, which is outstanding, is in English. We wouldn't find this kind of hidden on the table of contents page and hidden location-wise in the back of the book. And oh my gosh, zoom in on some of the summary. In Ferdinand Township, the immigration settlement of German immigrants goes back to the Catholic priest Joseph Kundet. There's actually a Joseph Kundet Avenue right beside St. Joseph Catholic Church, and it affirms what anyone who's researching in that county knows, that, oh my gosh, I have to pay attention to this Kundet guy because he wasn't just a priest, he was an immigration agent. And look at the next paragraph. If we had more time, we could just read this whole paragraph and digest it. But what was he looking for? He was looking for German-speaking Catholics to come settle this area. And he kind of misrepresented the area, saying that was flowing with milk and honey and God bless the land and, very little toil to get bountiful crops like you've never seen before. So it tells us where the people came from, as we saw in the previous graphs, the pie charts. And then in the summary, it's affirming where people are coming from and why they're coming and who might be coming with them. It's amazing. It's just absolutely amazing. And a summary is another part of a book, kind of like an afterword in a way. And in this case, in English, look at the bibliography. Oh my gosh, you could go hours looking through this to say, where can I get my hands on other resources that these two professors used to put forth this treatise on Germans in Knox County and DuBois County in southern Indiana. Zooming in a little bit, we have references from the Indiana Magazine of History, really well known, often overlooked. Immigrants in the Ozarks, so they're expanding beyond Indiana. The settling of North America, that makes me very curious, knowing my affinity for the Harvard Encyclopedia. Peopling Indiana, we've already referenced that, making the Corn Belt a Bloomington publication. Factors influence the distribution of German pioneer population in Minnesota. So again, the bibliography here is branching out way more than Indiana and the two counties that were part of the hypothesis. So amazing things can be discovered. So we can develop a really nice resource list, a really nice resource kind of checklist, if you will, of things that if my sources are getting a little thin and I still have a lot of answers, I have a lot of story about a particular ancestor that I need to find, maybe I should be looking at these endnotes and bibliographies to find more information. So jumping to another book, I put the title at the top, Mining for Freedom, Black History Meets the California Gold Rush. So in the acknowledgments, even though you might think, oh, Curt, you're really stretching it here. I'm not sure I'm going to hang with you. Again, reasonably exhaustive research. So, of course, the person's thanking, the owners and family members, etc. Next, though, that last paragraph on your screen says, I could not have gathered research details and photos without the help of so many at this county museum and history center. If my research is in this area with this ethnic group, and I haven't explored this county museum and history center, this acknowledgement would tell me, Curt, you need to put that on your priority to-do list because there may be other things. If someone can find data to create a monographic publication, maybe I can find data to enhance my family tree. And again, more thanks. You might say, big deal, but are there things here? My thanks go out to longtime members of the community who have come forward and led me to stories, books, photographs, and artifacts I might otherwise never have found. You know the question that popped into my mind when I read that? How can I leverage that community for stories, books, photographs, and artifacts? If this author can, what is the conduit, the avenue that I can to leverage that? So again, you might be smiling real widely or leaning back in your chair and scratching your head like, you're stretching my willing suspension of disbelief there, Curt. But deploy those tactics. They will pay dividends. And so it just continues to go on. And the individual is acknowledging in this last paragraph here, another author and another book, and William Katz, yet another author and book. We might want to take a look at those same books. If we look in the preface of the book, we have that same kind of information about 5,000 African Americans from all over the world. Wonder what brought them, drove them, where they settled, what they did. The newly declared Free State of California enforced strict fugitive slave laws, other restrictions, denial of rights. So what did that look like? Doesn't that make you at least a little curious about what did that look like? And then moving on further down, a little more context for how the book was written. And again, I will probably mispronounce this, so I probably won't pronounce it. It's leading us back to this county, right? Where we want to do research. And we'll just flip quickly through this. I wanted to point out the second half of this column of data because it brings to mind, and anytime something can bring to mind in a published book, something to remind me of good methodology, I consider that just sort of an added little bonus, sort of the sprinkles on top of the icing on top of the cake. So the author writes, in my lectures, I remind my audience members that I was born in the early 1940s, which means I was born a colored baby, grew into a Negro child, became a Black adult, and in middle age, I'm now an African American. What does that tell us if we're looking for African Americans? It tells us, oh yeah, I got to remember all those terms that were used at different times to describe this particular ethnic group. So there's just a lot of learning, as they say, to go on there. Moving to another general history, which I think so many of us just ignore general histories because we're kind of on a mission. I need to find an ancestor. I need to find these particular ancestors. We're on a mission. Well, sometimes being on a mission just doesn't work totally for us. So we glance down the contents pages and we see that not just indigenous peoples, but migrations into the American West. We have Hispanic peoples up toward the top of the table of contents, so we can kind of see, okay, these are kind of more specific topics I can look for. Because I am who I am, a citation analysis nut. Look at all of these amazing resources that one can find in the bibliography to this book. I wanted to highlight this particular book has contributors, and you might think, you're really stretching it now, Curt. But look at where these contributors come from. The second one there, Jack Mack, a professor at Yale. So, he's an author of this book. I wonder if Yale has some resources. And Julie Jeffrey, she's with Witcher College, and she's published that. I wonder if that college has resources. Those are legitimate questions. And Patricia from the University of Colorado. And Scott Monaday, what he's published. Others' publications can lead us to new resources and the repositories, the institutions, I should say, where they come from. And those institutions, archival repositories, may hold much gold for us. Why not pick up and investigate those clues? We're challenged to do so by the GPS, right? We're challenged to do reasonably exhaustive research. So there's a book, Frontier Faith, that talks about all the various religions and faiths of not just Indiana, but kind of Indiana and the surrounding Great Lakes area. This is an example of a great appendix. So in the appendix of this book, which isn't obvious in the title page on the table of contents, is at the very bottom, you can see it, but here's an appendix of all the clergy and religious at Fort Wayne for more than a century, and some documentation about it, 1749 to 1860. What a nice plus to a book that may help us find more records. And let's say we don't give a whit about the ministers and the presbyters and the rabbis and the priests. We just want our ancestors' records. Well, isn't it nice to know when churches were extant when, and who the ministers, pastors, missionaries might be, just in case we can use those descriptors to try to side door, backdoor our way into other data. Sometimes the straight, clear path isn't necessarily the one we can easily use or easily access. So appendix. And again, Frontier Faith has a great list of notes. Curt's happy. Look at those annotated footnotes and endnotes. And it has a great bibliography of manuscript materials and published sources. Oh my gosh, who wouldn't want to do that? Finally, the final book I want to show you, Finding the Grain. We're going just a little bit long, but I'll wrap it up here soon in a moment. Pioneer German journals. So you think, okay, these are German journals. Great. My ancestor didn't leave any journals, didn't write anything that I'm aware of. Well, why not just use this compilation in a different way? Use it as an investigator to our advantage. So what do we find in this book, which is really well done? I love reading letters, diaries, and journals during a time period where my ancestors lived. Well, at the end of every chapter, and every chapter is a collection of journals from this particular person, there are notes. And these are very robust notes where you can see other publications that we might want to refer to. You can see a lot of explanatory information. Many German immigrants who settled in DuBois County lived first in Cincinnati before moving down the Ohio River. That sets up a whole migration pattern that we may or may not have known about. There's St. Joseph Catholic Church in Jasper again. There's that Kuhndeck fellow. So we're getting a lot of affirmation, a lot of validation of things that we've read before. We get a citation at the bottom of the screen, Yearbook of German American Studies. What is that? I wonder whether I should investigate that more. And just more very robust. I love this particular chapter 3 note. The following 31 letters, letter fragments, or notes, all in very bad shape, were not photocopied because they seemed unsalvageable. What is that to us as researchers? That's kind of a red flag, isn't it? It's like, unsalvageable? Really? Really? I wonder what's in them. We can take the brief amount of data here given about the dates and who wrote the letters, and maybe we can get access to now, today, digitized copies of those. Just more examples of these great, great notes. So I'm going to veer quickly to electronic, here comes a technical term, electronic stuff, right? So Wikipedia, I know some people's heads are exploding. Wikipedia is known by many as the devil. I don't see it that way at all. Yes, there's a lot of garbage in Wikipedia, but I guess we could go out wider and say there's a lot of garbage everywhere online, right? Why should that discourage us from finding the many mountains of gold and the many pearls that are also on the internet? So let's be professional. Let's keep our thinking sober minds turned on anytime I do anything on Wikipedia. So let's say I was interested in Fairfax, Virginia, because maybe an ancestor came there, maybe a migration pattern, who knows? The very first thing I do, kind of like when I open a physical book, I scroll down to the bottom. If there are no references or sources, I move on. If there are references and sources, that's really where I spend my time looking through. Are any of these possibly things I could use for my research? Oh my goodness. Yes, we can find a lot. So there are 90 footnotes, sources, if you will, references in this Wikipedia article about Fairfax, Virginia. And then down toward the bottom, we have, places adjacent to Fairfax, Virginia. We know how important context and adjacency is in our research. And then finally, I want to just show you how we can use the tools of Internet Archive. not only to find great publications online, like this one from the Genealogy Center, that's freely available 24/7, anywhere in the Milky Way galaxy with an internet connection, right? So the history of the Gwynn family. So we can actually go into film strip mode and quickly scan through the book, even if it's not necessarily our family, if it's in the right location. We can easily find out in film strip mode where the graphs and maps are, and we can easily find out where there are lists because they pop out. I apologize for the out of focus slide, but in this family history is a quick list of some selected marriages from Jefferson County, Tennessee. Wouldn't that be cool to take a look at? And then we can easily glide to the index online by just using the film strip version to click on an index, to click on any endnotes, because we can clearly see where those are. I have run a few minutes beyond what we promised Wednesdays with Witcher would be, but I hope that I have at least not made you too frustrated that you spent time on a pretty pedestrian topic, but that you really can say, aha, Curt, you've given me 1, 2, maybe 4 things to find the stories, all the stories. To do that, we need to come close to finding all the sources, all the data. And I think using books to their fullest, using books to their highest, greatest potential, and all the parts, not just the page that has our ancestor on it. I hope that will be of great benefit in continuing to pursue your family stories. So I'm going to stop my screen share. Thank you again for your ability, willingness, and time in joining us today. It's always a pleasure to spend a few moments with you. It never seems to be long enough. And I hope that I have not bored you out of your mind with such a pedestrian topic, but that I have given a little bit of spark to, yeah, I'm going to go back and I'm going to maybe reuse some sources where I just did person diving and kind of spread out my research. Thanks so much for joining me today. Have a good rest of your day being a good investigator of published information. Take care.